The last known activity from Ashlee Jenae on social media dates back to around April 4th or 5th when she posted to her Instagram from Zanzibar. She was there with her then-fiancé, Joe McCann, a man who was actively running a cryptocurrency fund at the time and appeared to be spending lavishly. Luxury trips, expensive experiences, and all of it documented publicly through her posts. This wasn't an isolated getaway either. There had been other high-end trips before this one. But somewhere after those final posts, something went very wrong.
And it continues to get worse, ladies and gentlemen. Influencer Ashlee Jenae's family noticed that her engagement ring was not on her finger when her body returned from Tanzania to the U.S. Ashlee's father, Harry Robinson, said he noticed when her body arrived to New Jersey that none of her personal belongings were there, including the wedding ring. They still have not got any more contact from her past fiancé, Joe McCann. But the family is doing an independent autopsy and the results are still pending. They are not trusting the Tanzanian government to do their job, and they're getting an independent autopsy from a clinic in New Jersey to see what really happened to Ashlee Jenae. Another story and a narrative being pushed out there that it's a random robbery. Let me know what y'all think in the comments. It's AG with Hype and TBG Media. I am out.
At some point during that trip, the two of them got into a serious argument. Things escalated to the point where they had to be physically separated. And after that, the story goes dark. What happened in the hours that followed remains unclear, and that lack of clarity is precisely what makes this case so deeply unsettling. What we do know is this: Ashlee traveled to Zanzibar with Joe McCann, and she never came home. She died there. And in the immediate aftermath, McCann was notably absent from any public conversation about what happened. No statements, no visible outreach, no transparency, just silence. Meanwhile, the people closest to Ashlee were left with no answers and nowhere to turn. Tanzanian authorities initially ruled her death as self-inflicted. At least one content creator who covered the story reported it as a suicide. But that conclusion didn't sit right with a lot of people, and it didn't stay unchallenged for long. Zanzibar began attracting serious negative attention. Independent creators started covering the story. News articles followed. A growing number of voices began calling for real accountability, refusing to let the case quietly disappear behind an official ruling. The pressure mounted steadily, and Joe McCann found himself at the center of it all. The suicide classification alone was no longer enough to close the conversation, because the deeper you looked into the details, the more questions emerged that explanation simply couldn't answer.
Fiancé did not reach out to us at all.
Do you believe that Joe McCann had something to do with your daughter's death?
We don't
want
have, it's under investigation, and we don't know what went on.
It's under investigation, and like we said, we just want transparency. Just let us know.
I want to make sure that everybody is fully aware that she was a light. She was a light, she was a beautiful person, and this doesn't align with who she is.
Understandably, the family really didn't want to talk about Joe McCann, the man who proposed to their daughter. Family wants answers. They don't understand why they haven't been able to reach Joe. They don't understand why he wasn't more forthcoming about what exactly happened to their daughter, and it's why they said they're speaking out. Next steps for them, they said, is trying to get to Zanzibar so they can get to the bottom of what happened.
As the pressure intensified, authorities moved to detain Joe McCann and confiscate his passport while he was held for questioning. That development alone shifted the entire tone of the investigation. It also raises a broader point worth addressing, one that applies to anyone considering travel to unfamiliar regions. Vacationing abroad can be a wonderful experience, but the reality is that legal protections and investigative standards vary dramatically from country to country. What this case illustrated clearly is how quickly an official ruling can shift when outside pressure is applied. One moment, it's classified as self-inflicted. International attention builds, public scrutiny increases, and suddenly the case is no longer closed. It's being re-examined. That inconsistency alone should give people pause. For Ashlee's family, the timeline made the loss even harder to process. They had spoken with her just 11 hours before she died. There was no indication, no warning, and then she was gone. The whiplash of that reality, combined with the fog surrounding the official account, left them with an overwhelming sense that they weren't getting the full story. A GoFundMe campaign was launched to support Ashlee's family through the ordeal, and the response from the public was significant, raising close to $64,000. But even with that outpouring of support, the family made clear that financial help wasn't the only thing they needed. What they were really asking for, what they kept pressing for, was something far more difficult to obtain.
Obtained video of a news conference today in Tanzania in which officials say they are holding Joe McCann for questioning and they are holding his passport while police wait for the postmortem. We have been unable to reach Joe McCann.
Through all of it, Joe McCann never reached out to Ashlee's family, not once. And that silence speaks volumes, because this wasn't a stranger. This was the woman he was planning to marry. She dies under unclear circumstances. He maintains he had nothing to do with it, and yet the people who loved her most never heard a single word from him. For a lot of people following this case, that absence said more than any statement ever could. Despite everything, there has been at least one meaningful step forward. Advocates, family members, and those who kept the pressure alive managed to make enough progress to get Ashlee's body returned home to New Jersey. That matters deeply. Whatever questions remain unanswered, her family can now lay her to rest with the dignity she deserved. That is a genuinely positive development, and it should be acknowledged as such. But make no mistake, a body being returned home is not the same thing as justice being served. The cause of Ashlee's death has still not been definitively established. The full story of what happened inside that relationship, on that trip, in those final hours, remains incomplete. Something is wrong here, and until there are real answers, this case deserves to stay in the public conversation.
Robinson, also known as Ashlee Jenae on Instagram, is an influencer. She went to Zanzibar with her boyfriend. He proposed while they were there. She went for her birthday to celebrate. She was having a great time. At some point, they start arguing. The hotel puts them in separate rooms, and hours later, Ashlee is found deceased. It is said to be a suicide.
And then came one more devastating detail. Every single one of Ashlee's personal belongings, her jewelry, her possessions, everything she had with her, was stolen before her body was even returned home. All of it gone. This is a moment that calls for real honesty. Not just about what happened to Ashlee, but about something deeper. There are a lot of young people out there chasing a version of the good life, financial security, luxury, and stability. And in that pursuit, some end up placing their trust in people who were never genuinely invested in them. People who see them not as a partner, but as a convenience. And sometimes, by the time that truth becomes clear, it's already too late. Ashlee deserved so much more than what she got. She had her whole life ahead of her. But in her final moments abroad, in a foreign country, the person who was supposed to be her greatest protector was nowhere to be found, and the system around her reduced her to just another case to be processed and closed. Now, corruption and theft in certain parts of the world, as painful as it is to say, are known realities. That part, while heartbreaking, is not entirely surprising. What is harder to reconcile is the behavior of Joe McCann, a man who claimed to love this woman, a man who by all accounts had significant financial resources, and yet he never reached out to her family. He never contributed financially to bring her home. He never made a single public statement expressing grief, concern, or accountability. Her belongings disappeared. Her body had to be crowdfunded to go home, and he said nothing. If you're genuinely innocent and someone you love dies suddenly, silence is not a natural response. Silence is a choice. There's also a broader lesson here that needs to be said plainly. When you build your life around someone, when you publicly stake your loyalty, your future, and your identity on a relationship, you have to know that person is truly in your corner. Not just when things are good, not just when you're traveling but the photos look great, but when things fall apart, when you're sick, when you're struggling, when you need someone to fight for you. That is when real love shows itself. And in Ashlee's case, it never showed up at all. The community that ultimately came through for her family, the people who raised the funds, kept the story alive, and applied the pressure, were strangers who simply refused to look away. That says everything. To Ashlee's family, we hope you get every answer you are owed. And to Joe McCann, the world is still watching and still waiting.